Welcome to 1 Minute to Midnight. I'm Wilfred Cunningham. Venezuelan food production has continually declined over the last 20 years, with the country increasingly relying on imports. But now, with the economy crippled, Venezuela faces shortages of essential commodities, increasing violence, and potential famine. Venezuela was ruled by a succession of military dictators throughout the end of the 19th century. But after a little more than 100 years after its independence from Spain, Venezuela's fortunes began to change with the discovery of large amounts of oil beneath Lake Maracaibo. This ended a period of bloody civil conflict and political instability, allowing Juan Vicente Gómez, who in 1908 had overthrown previous president Cipriani Castro, who in turn had seized power in a coup d'etat with the help of Gómez in 1899, to stabilize the country and centralize power. Gómez was the president for 3 non-consecutive terms, but remained the constant de facto leader of Venezuela until his death in 1935. By that time, oil revenue had by far exceeded the government's previous economic crutch of agricultural exports, and Venezuela's gross domestic product was the highest in Latin America. In 1945, a coup briefly ended dictatorial rule, with the 1947 election largely considered to be Venezuela's first fair and democratic vote. But on the 24th of November 1948, Romulo Gallegos was overthrown by a military junta. On the 23rd of January 1958, that junta was in turn overthrown with a combined military coup and popular uprising. The 1960s saw the rise of mostly leftist guerrilla movements, which were largely quelled during the late 60s and early 70s. On the 16th of October 1973, in response to American aid to Israel during the 19-day Yom Kippur War, OPEC raised the posted price of oil by 70%, and during October, Arabian members of OPEC, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, alongside Egypt and Syria, placed an oil embargo on Canada, Japan, the Netherlands, the United Kingdom, and the United States of America. As a result, Venezuelan oil revenues quadrupled between 1970 and 1975, and the economy boomed, allowing unprecedented increases in government spending. This ended after high prices ultimately stifled demand toward the end of the 1970s, which, with a surplus of oil, prompted a collapse in oil prices during the early to mid-1980s. On the 4th of February 1992, Lieutenant Colonel Hugo Chavez attempted to help initiate a coup that would install previous President Rafael Caldera in office and replace his successor, Carlos Andrés Pérez, who was seen by many as corrupt and as being a secret proponent of US and International Monetary Fund policies, despite having opposed them before office, and as repressing the people through use of state violence. The coup failed, but the following year Pérez was impeached for massive embezzlement, and the National Congress removed him from office on the 31st of August. Ramón José Velázquez became the acting president until democratic elections brought back Caldera, who, whilst dealing with a continually faltering economy, pardoned Chavez in 1994, alongside others who had taken part in the 1992 coup, fulfilling his election promise to do so. This made Chavez a viable political entity, who was seen by many as having the principles and courage to stand up to a corrupt government. He spent the next few years developing socialist Bolivarian policies and ideas, and making alliances with other Latin American leaders and with then-President of Cuba, Fidel Castro. In July 1997, Chavez and his supporters founded a political party, Movimiento Quinta República, the Fifth Republic Movement, or MVR. Chavez won the 1998 election and became the president on the 2nd of February 1999. On the 27th of February, Chavez began Plan Bolivar 2000, in which around 40 to 70,000 Venezuelan soldiers began humanitarian operations to vaccinate large numbers of the poor, distribute food, and set up medical and community centers. Chavez continued with such social operations, which he was able to fund through Venezuela's oil wealth. On the 11th of April 2002, An attempted coup saw Chavez ousted from power for 47 hours. Resuming the presidency after the coup was crushed, Chavez and others later blamed United States interventionism for initiating or helping to plan the coup, which was a significant moment in the souring of relations between Venezuela and the US. A general strike, starting in early December 2002, organized by some of Chavez's opponents, who aimed to use the resulting economic pressure to oust Chavez, fizzled out during the following January, but succeeded in damaging the economy in the long term. Venezuela's gross domestic product began to fall, and shrunk by 27% from January to April 2003. In response to the strike, the Chavez government established currency controls on the 5th of February 2003 under the Commission for the Administration of Currency Exchange, which is now the National Center for Foreign Commerce, or SANCOEX. These currency controls limited the movement of money out of Venezuela and are what many economists point to as the reason for Venezuela's economic collapse. This wasn't immediate, however, and Chavez continued to win free and fair elections as he became more leftist and continued his expensive social policies. On the 1st of January 2008, the Venezuelan government created a new currency, the Bolivar Fuerte, with a ratio of 1 to 1,000 of the previous Bolivar. This did little to ease things, and political stability was undermined again when Chavez died on the 5th of March 2013. He was succeeded by his vice president, Nicolás Maduro, who won the subsequent presidential election on the 14th of April. Maduro maintained many of Chavez's own policies, and under him Venezuela has slipped into recession, rioting, and major shortages of foods, healthcare products, fuels, and other commodities. Rationing of food, gasoline, and water, at least in parts of Venezuela, began to be reported in early 2014, and such shortages have been, it seems reasonable to say, the chief contributing factor to widespread looting and unrest that has occurred throughout the country over recent years, coming to a head in 2016. On the 12th of April 2016, the International Monetary Fund projected inflation would increase by 481% during the year, and by 1,642% in 2017. Maduro has blamed foreign intervention and economic warfare, conducted by other states such as the USA, and has said in the past that because many goods in Venezuela are subsidized by the government, they can be smuggled out of the country and sold for higher prices in neighboring countries, and that such actions are occurring in significant numbers and are grossly undermining the availability of goods. But smuggling can't be blamed for the economic downturn and the 5 currency devaluations that have occurred since Chavez came to power. Perhaps the cause can more appropriately be attributed to the fall in oil prices, which were $100 a barrel in mid-2014, but had dropped to around $26 a barrel during February 2016, coupled with the tight currency restrictions Chavez set in 2003. Those restrictions curtailed Venezuela's ability to import goods, which it has increasingly relied on, especially to meet its food needs. The restrictions also created a huge currency black market, both out of greed and necessity. As the bolivar's value tumbled, importers would increasingly only ship goods if they were paid in a reliable currency, which was often impossible under these new laws. At the same time, Chavez's policy of nationalizing many means of food production, such as farms and processing facilities, means Venezuela does not have the infrastructure to produce its own food in sufficient quantities, and has relied on imports for more than 10 years. This in turn has been exacerbated by increasing government intervention. At the beginning of 2015, the Maduro government ordered international food companies to move off production and storage premises so that low-cost housing could be built, and nationalized a chain of 35 supermarkets, and continues to maintain price controls, meaning importation of goods to stock such supermarkets is too expensive to be viable, or impossible because of unwilling suppliers or insufficient foreign currency. Now, around 4/5 of the population are unable to afford food, and some, such as international finance expert Daniel Lansberg-Rodríguez, say Venezuela may transition from food scarcity to famine. Oil prices are now $50 a barrel. However, Venezuela is gripped by civil unrest, and its abilities to produce have been damaged. Even if it recovers from its food crisis, the effects of such instability and scarcity may have undermined the Venezuelan economy and society for years to come. So, until next time, goodbye, and try to remain calm.